What if borders disappeared tomorrow? Imagine waking up tomorrow to the most shocking news of the century. All borders across the globe have been abolished, effective immediately. No customs, no immigration officers, no passports, just a borderless world. People from any country could live, work, and travel anywhere. A world without boundaries sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel, but what would really happen? Would it be the dawn of a new golden age, or the collapse of civilization as we know it? In this thought-provoking video, we explore what life could look like if borders disappeared tomorrow. The benefits, the chaos, and everything in between. The immediate global shockwave. The moment borders vanish, the world plunges into a state of confusion. Airports, land crossings, seaports, all would become essentially lawless zones. Border agents would no longer have authority, and international travel would turn into a free-for-all. One minute you're being scanned at customs, the next minute you're walking freely into another country like it's your backyard. For border towns, this would mean instant transformation. Imagine walking from Texas into Mexico without a second glance, or from Poland into Ukraine with no checkpoints. In some places, this would be celebrated. Long-separated families could reunite, trade would boom, and movement would feel freer than ever before. But there would also be chaos. Countries that rely heavily on controlling migration flows, like the US, Australia, or Hungary, would struggle to maintain order. Panic would spread among authorities. Some governments might deploy troops to maintain control internally, even though there would be no official lines to protect anymore. The psychological impact alone, suddenly living in a world where no place is off-limits, would cause social unrest in some places and jubilation in others. Governments would lose their grip fast. Without borders, the very idea of a nation-state begins to unravel. Modern governments are built on the notion of defined territory. Remove those boundaries, and the power structure weakens almost instantly. Passports would become worthless overnight. Citizenship would be reduced to a technicality. Immigration policies would dissolve. Embassies would lose their function, and national sovereignty would be a thing of the past. Some governments would collapse. Others might rapidly devolve into regional leadership or local governance structures. Large, diverse nations like India, China, or the US might split into self-governing regions. Smaller countries might get swallowed into larger networks of influence, like corporations or cultural blocs. New power vacuums would emerge, and the strongest voices might not be politicians anymore. They could be CEOs, tech giants, or even local influencers commanding trust over the internet. The largest human migration in history. If borders disappeared, people would move, and not just in the thousands. We could witness the largest migration event in human history. Millions, possibly billions, would leave behind areas suffering from war, poverty, or environmental disaster. People from struggling parts of the world would head toward more developed regions with better infrastructure and opportunity. Africa to Europe, Latin America to North America, South Asia to the Gulf states, but also major cities like London, New York, and Tokyo could see overpopulation within weeks. Infrastructure would buckle. Housing would run out. Roads, public transport, water, and electricity systems would be pushed to their limits. At the same time, rural or abandoned areas might see rebirth. People looking for space, safety, or sustainability could flock to places like the Canadian North, the Mongolian steppe, or the Australian outback. It would be a global game of musical chairs, some places thriving, others collapsing. Economic disruption on a global scale. A borderless world means no customs duties, no tariffs, and no immigration barriers. In theory, this could spark massive economic growth. Products and labor could move without restriction. Trade would become simpler, and prices could drop as global competition increases. But in practice, the short-term disruption would be enormous. Wealthier countries would face a flood of workers willing to accept lower wages, which could depress salaries and create tension with native populations. Developing countries might see their best minds and youngest workers leave in droves, accelerating brain drain and economic decline. Multinational corporations would gain even more influence. With no regulations tying them to specific countries, they'd base operations purely on cost efficiency, not responsibility. Tech companies could become pseudo-governments, offering digital IDs, healthcare plans, and even currencies. Local businesses would suffer. Farmers in Kenya might compete with producers in Brazil and China for the same markets. Without protections, fragile economies could collapse under the weight of unrestricted capitalism. Cultural blending, or cultural erosion. One of the biggest changes would be cultural. With free movement, people from every corner of the world would mix in unprecedented ways. That sounds beautiful, and in many ways, it could be. Languages, foods, traditions, and religions would blend into new, rich tapestries of identity. New hybrid cultures could emerge, representing the best of global diversity. But there's another side to that coin. Smaller cultures, especially indigenous ones, could be diluted or disappear altogether. Unique languages might vanish. Local customs could be replaced by global norms. Even national holidays or traditions might fade as identity becomes more global and less local. Would this lead to a more united world or a more homogenized one? That depends on how much people value preserving their roots in a world where everyone is welcome anywhere. Security, crime, and the question of law. With no borders, crime would become harder to control, at least in the beginning. Human trafficking, drug smuggling, and weapons trade would no longer need to cross borders because there would be none. Tracking international criminals would be a logistical nightmare. Some places would likely experience a spike in organized crime. Gangs could expand their networks across continents without much resistance. Terrorist cells could relocate with ease. Prisons could become overwhelmed or ineffective if people can escape to another region unchecked. In response, a global security coalition might emerge. Think of it as a superpowered version of Interpol. But without shared legal systems or enforcement power, justice could be slow or non-existent. Local communities might begin organizing their own security forces, leading to privatized law enforcement or vigilante justice in some areas. Trust in central authority would drop, and digital surveillance might rise in its place. Public services would be overwhelmed. In a borderless world, people would naturally seek out places with the best healthcare, education, and social safety nets. But those systems are designed for limited populations, not global demand. Countries with generous welfare systems like Norway, Canada, or Germany could be flooded with newcomers hoping for a better life. Hospitals would run out of beds. Schools would struggle to accommodate new students. Social services would buckle under the pressure. This would force a hard reset. Public benefits might shift from citizenship-based to contribution-based. New systems might arise where people must work or invest in a region before accessing benefits. But even that would require tracking, which is difficult in a world with no national registries or visa controls. The inequality between regions would become more visible. While some places prosper through new ideas and labor, others might collapse under the strain of overpopulation and underfunding. The rise of a one-world government? Eventually, one question would dominate the global conversation. If borders are gone, who's in charge? The idea of a global government has always been controversial, but in a world without borders, it might become necessary. A one-world system could provide unified laws, taxation, identification, and public service regulation. It could handle global crises, like climate change, pandemics, and terrorism, more effectively than today's fragmented approach. A universal healthcare model, global education standards, and shared infrastructure goals could be created. But would people accept it? Different religions, economic systems, and political ideologies could clash violently. Some fear that a global government could become authoritarian or corrupted. Others believe it's the only way forward in a truly connected world. One thing is clear: without borders, the world would have to rethink not just how we live, but who we are. A world without borders would be wild, chaotic, and deeply transformative. It could bring freedom, innovation, and unity, or collapse, conflict, and confusion. Either way, it forces us to ask, are borders protecting us or holding us back? One day, we might find out. Are we ready for that world? Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell.